So the Manosphere has been gaining so much popularity over the last couple of years, and despite there being different pushback from feminists, mainstream media, and other detractors, I don't think it is going to be slowing down anytime soon. And the case between Tory Lanez and Meg Thee Stallion are prime examples as to why more men are taking the red pill and why more men are really joining the Manosphere. It has been quite controversial, and it has highlighted the really gender divide and the battle that has been going on between men and women for over the last decade, especially online. Now, domestic violence is obviously super important and nothing to take lightly. And because this case involved domestic violence, I think it should have been handled with scrutiny. The problem with this case is the fact that Tory Lanez, now who was found guilty for supposedly having committed a violent act, has no DNA evidence or no conclusive evidence that actually links him to the gun or links him to actual violence that would prove that he was guilty. And this is a prime situation where men, black men in particular, are usually assumed to be guilty, even when there is no evidence, even when there is nothing out there, no DNA, nothing to actually show without a reasonable doubt that they are guilty. And so again, when you're talking about something as important and as serious as domestic violence, and the charges and the punishment associated with it are something as serious as 23 years in prison, I think it's fair to assume that the evidence should be overwhelming. Without a reasonable doubt, we should be able to know, okay, this happened. And really what we do know so far is Meg Thee Stallion hid evidence of a sexual relationship. A key witness, Harris, changed her story and even admitted to lying later on. Lanez did have a recording of him saying sorry to Meg Thee Stallion, but he didn't say that he actually shot her. There was no actual DNA evidence that actually linked him to the gun. The evidence came back inconclusive. And let's not forget the fact that there was actual DNA evidence of an unidentified woman found on the gun. And by the way, for some reason they chose not to test the DNA of Harris, a witness in the case. So, case in point, there's just a lot of speculation, there's a lot of assumption, and there's a lot of holes. And I think when a man's life is on the line, up to 22 years, and his legacy and his career, I think it's a bit unfair to assume he's guilty when there's so much that is unclear. And it's based upon the accusation of witnesses that have been found to not be totally reliable. Case in point, there is a lot of gray area. In my opinion, it did not seem like this was an open and shut case. If anything, there were a lot of people who were surprised by the verdict, because it seemed like the case was very much in his favor. And to me, this goes to some of the frustration that a lot of men feel, and especially black men. The fact that black men are generally perceived as guilty before proven innocent. And then when it comes to just men in general and talks about domestic violence in cases such as these, they're usually also always assumed to be guilty. And I think in the minds of Americans, it is really hard for us to grasp the fact that women can be violent, that women can be perpetrators, that women themselves can also be just as guilty in these kinds of cases, even when some cases the women are the perpetrators. And so situations like these were literally a fling, a relationship that wasn't even that serious, is now costing a man potentially 23 years of his life and his career. And the way there is a history of men who have been wiped clean through family courts, men who have lost to wealth, essentially the different way that men now have been negatively impacted in family court, negatively impacted, and many times having to face false accusations, black men in particular. This is why you're starting to have more men go red pill. And I was a little torn because I think domestic violence is incredibly serious, and I never want to be a person that victim blames. But the problem with Meg Thee Stallion was that she hid key evidence. And her friend, another key witness, even admitted to having lied earlier. And so, as far as I can tell, both of the witnesses are hard to trust. They're unreliable. How do we know if they were lying then that they're not lying now? How do we know? Again, this adds more doubt and this adds more scrutiny. And so when you keep this into consideration, how can you say now without a reasonable doubt that a man deserves to be put behind bars when so much is unclear? And there's not even clear evidence linking him to the crime. And again, the issue with this is if the roles were reversed, if Tory Lanez was the one that said that he was shot from Meg Thee Stallion, but then he was found to have lied or withheld information, and if some of his witnesses were also found to have lied and held information, do you really think that the verdict would have been the same? I highly doubt it. And it's situations like these that can start to show clearly the way men and women are handled quite differently in the justice system. One of the other reasons, there's a lot of mixed feelings about this is because there is a history of women making false accusations and not being held accountable. And we don't really fully know if this is the case of Meg Thee Stallion, but the bigger issue is that it seems that women can hurl false accusations at men and then go back and backtrack, and there's really no repercussions. But if a man has an accusation made against his career, even if he does end up being proven innocent, that is always going to be a stain on his legacy. And so this is why this case has become so controversial, because for men, this is also a reminder of the weakness of the system, and that even innocent men can be vulnerable to the accusations of women without there being really any consequences for that woman, even if she turns around and says that she lies. So cases like this really become reminders and really become opportunities for men to rally behind their issues and their causes. Cases like these continue to shine the light on the different ways men and women are treated in the justice system, and they are not the same. Cases such as these, especially when they involve celebrities, shape conversations and also impact the way that men and women interact. There's already been a lot of tension going on between men and women. There's already been a bit of a gender war. You've already seen this really escalate online. And then now when you have a successful man who literally is potentially losing his career over a case where the evidence was inconclusive, where women lied but were very much assumed to be innocent. It's already well known that the court system is not totally fair and equal. It's already well understood that even when it comes to the talk of domestic violence, we're not having a fully honest conversation. Both men and women can be guilty, and how women in very many ways can actually be perpetrators. It's not popular to even talk about that. And this is some of the ways that men start to feel isolated, and men start to feel like their voices are being heard, especially in cases where they were the ones that were abused, or they're the ones that were harmed, but they're still seen as guilty. Especially in cases where the woman uses their femininity, or the woman uses their tears or whatever it may be to take advantage of them and to screw them over in court. This stuff happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough to where men are coming together and finding places to talk and finding places to share their stories and share their failures and share their injustices and talk about how they haven't felt like they've been heard. And stories like this only aggravate the wound. Stories like this only put more fuel to the fire. Situations like this allow red pill men and men in the manosphere to say, see what's going on? See the risk associated with dealing with these modern women? See the risk associated with dealing with these city girls? See the risk associated with it? You could lose everything over a fling. And so this is the impact that these kinds of cases have. Even if you don't agree with Meg Thee Stallion or Tory Lanez, or even if you think Tory Lanez was totally guilty, the fact is this story speaks to a larger conversation that is going on. The way men feel like they have been mistreated in the court system, the way women are usually always perceived to be innocent when it comes to domestic violence, although the evidence shows that women oftentimes very much perpetuate violence. The way that in society it is still hard for us to actually conceptualize the fact that women can also be violent perpetrators. In the way essentially that men have felt silence, especially in the mainstream media, especially, in television, in magazines, in these different more popular publications, the way men have felt silent. And after a while, if you felt silent for long enough, you are going to fight back. You are going to look for a way to speak out. And this is exactly what the Manosphere provides. And this is exactly how Red Pill Spaces is giving men not only a place where they can find reprieve or find a place where they can feel like they can at least be understood, but in some ways trying to warn other men against the toxicity of female nature. And whether or not you agree with it, think it's right, or think it's totally wrong, the reality is cases like this add fuel to the fire. And I think unless there's a willingness to start to try to fully understand both sides, unless there is truly a desire to start to lean in to the complaints of men and seek to understand, well, why is the manosphere growing? Well, why are Red Pill Spaces going on? It can't just be because all these men are crazy incels. Maybe there's something going on. Unless there is a willingness to at least seek to understand why men are being overlooked and how systematically they are not being helped, unless there's a willingness as even women, as a society, to start to try to bridge that gap, then you're going to see more men flock to the Red Pill Spaces and Manosphere Spaces. And if you think it's dangerous and if you think it's not good, then it's your responsibility to start to try to address the pains and the issues and the complaints that these men are making. Otherwise, it's gonna grow. But what do you think? Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know. Leave your questions, comments, concerns in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening if you've gotten this far, and we'll talk later. Bye.